I'll just go first. For me, if you look at what he did last year, his receiving production alone would have landed him at, wide receiver 14. He would, if you look at just his receiving production, don't even take into consideration his rushing production, it would have put him at wide receiver 14 last year. That would have sandwiched him between DJ Moore and DJ Chark. He had a nice 69.1 points from his rushing production, and that accounted for less than 28% of his fantasy points. Once Gordon returned to the fold in week 5, he was RB15 in points per game with Gordon there at RB11 overall, and from those first couple of weeks, he was RB6 in points per game. So I'm not gonna go in counting on that amount of receiving production. And since 2015, there have only been 3 backs. I even brought this number down a little bit from, I think he had 92 catches last year. Even if you want to say he's not going to get there, only 3 backs since 2015 have given us multiple seasons or back-to-back seasons of 75 plus catches. And that was, I think it was Kamara, McCaffrey, and Lev Bell, if I'm remembering correctly. And if you drop that number down to 60, to even take that regression down a little bit further from the amount of catches he had last year, there's only been 7 backs that have given us back-to-back 60 catch seasons. We talked about a little bit about this offense and my feelings on it when we talked about Hunter Henry during the tight end ranking show. And frankly, I just think this is going to be an offense that's going to want to slow everything down. They were already one of the slowest teams last year in terms of plays per second and their overall pace. They obviously brought in Josh Kelly, who honestly I'm not even that big of a fan of, but I think it goes to show that they're going to run a split backfield there in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So for me, like I said, I'm just not going to count on that amount of receiving production. They obviously extended him. He's still going to be involved. I don't think this is going to become a case where he's back to playing like a 1B role by any means, but I'm just not going to lean into all of that receiving production. So you have the floor, and why don't you go ahead and just rip me up here?
Yeah, well, let me tell you why you're wrong. Okay, so
took that deep breath. Here it goes.
Yeah, what I get, right? Like, I'm not expecting him to have 92 receptions this year, but what I think that he lacks in probably losing a little bit of that pass catching work, because to be honest with you, if you look at Phillip Rivers to Tyrod Taylor, right? Because that's what we have to go off. Phillip Rivers historically really targets his running backs a crazy clip. So last year he targeted his running backs 31.6% of the time, right? That's only one of 3 teams that exceeded 26% target share. In 2018, it was 25% and 22% in 2017. Now, you look at that, and Tyrod Taylor, if you got to go back to 2015 and 2016 when he was in Buffalo, and he targeted running backs 10% of the time and 12% of the time, and that was LaShawn McCoy, right? So you may say, well, Kevin, if that's a pretty fucking substantial drop-off, and I would agree, it is. But what I think that what he makes up for or loses a little bit in the receiving game, I think he makes up for in the opportunities that he's going to get carrying the ball. He only got 18.2 carries per game last year. I think that bumps up. I think you see him somewhere more in line with maybe the 14 to efficient running backs we've seen last year. He was first in yards per reception. He had 19.3 fantasy points per game. His 6.9 yards per touch was first in the league last year. So he is a hyper-efficient running back, and I think in this offense, I think that he can still continue to do that. I don't know how long Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starting quarterback. I think there's a strong chance that Justin Herbert takes over at some point this season. You know, typically we don't, outside of really Pat Mahomes, that's really the only time we see a first-round quarterback, especially a top 10 quarterback, not play the entire season or not get a chance during the season. So with all those things considered, yes, I do think that he's going to see a drop-off in his receiving work, but I don't think it's going to be massive. I think we could see somewhere in the range of, dropping down from the 92 receptions, probably somewhere in that 65 range. I think that's still very fair, but I think he makes up for that like I said, with his opportunities that he is going to get as a runner. He also had 6 goal line carries, which is pretty impressive considering the fact that he was pretty much relegated to the RB2 in that offense outside of those first 4 weeks of the season when Melvin Gordon was suspended. So with all those things considered, like, I really just still think that Austin Ekeler is a smash play. He had RB1 weeks, 7 RB2, and 2 RB3 weeks last year. So almost 90% of his weeks that he was fantasy relevant. So I'm not all that worried about Joshua Kelly or Justin Jackson. Yes, I think they get an opportunity, but I have no problem taking him where he's going.
Currently, he is going at 204 according to the Fantasy Football Calculator. Fantasy Pros consensus has him at RB13. We actually just got a question in the chat from Rattleman who said, so where would you want to draft Ekeler in a half-point PPR? He normally does not feel comfortable until the mid-third to take him. So, Kev, you're good with that price. So how much higher would you take him ahead of 204 where he's going right now?
So he's currently going at RB12, right? And so I really don't have that big of an issue with taking him there. Like I said, I think the upside's certainly there for him. I think that he can still command a heavy workload back here. He only handled 46% of the opportunities last year in that backfield. So I think we could see much more of a 55-60% opportunity share coming his way. And I think with, like I said, all things considered, I think it's really hard for him not to really hit, I think, his value. I don't really have a problem with taking him right around there. I think that he is one of the more safer options in terms of that. And maybe he falls a little bit off. He did score 11 touchdowns last year, or 4.9% touchdown rate. I think that could drop a little bit, maybe to 7 or 8. But with all things considered, I just think that he can make up for all that in all the other areas of this game.
Yeah, I mean, if the carries do come up, you mentioned the opportunity share he had. In terms of the rushing that he had that only came from running backs, there was less than 40%, and he was only one of 2 running backs last year who finished as a RB1 that did not have at least 2/3 of their rush attempts, again, coming from the running backs. I didn't take into account the quarterback rushing share. Like 108 targets, like you said, 92 catches, 993 yards, 8 touchdowns. And that's, I think you're still going to be banking on a lot of that receiving work. And it absolutely could happen. I'm just not going to bank on it. In terms of the question we got, I wouldn't feel comfortable taking him until the back end of the second. He's going in the front end now. And I think that would also depend on how I started my draft, because I would not want him as my RB1. Kev, would you feel comfortable with him as your RB1?
I would. Yeah, I would be fine with taking him there as my RB1.
Okay. Well, if you're watching right now, go ahead and drop in the comments and let us know whose side you're on.